The Hungarian goulash started, as far as we know, back in 600 AD at the southern end of the Ural Mountains. Over the next 200 years, the Magyars are slowly on the move west. By the year 900, with lots of slaughter, they established themselves in what is now Hungary. They had raided as far west as Spain, northern Germany, and southern Italy. The head of the 7 tribes was Prince Arpad. In 973, Geza, great-grandson of Arpad, asked the Holy Roman Emperor Otto II to send Catholic missionaries to Hungary. Saint Adalbert of Prague baptized both Geza and his son Vach. The latter was given the name István, Stephen, the first king and saint of all Hungarians. It just so happens I'm recording this on August the 20th, his feast day. It was under both Prince Geza and King Saint István that Pannonhalma was founded, and the Benedictines were used by the king to Christianize Hungary. The Arpad dynasty dies out, and from 1308 to 1445, Hungary's greatest expansion takes place. Under Charles I, 1308 to 42, he was the one who introduced the gold Florent coin, based on the one in Florence, from which it gets its name even to this day. His son, Lajos Nagy, Louis the Great, promotes culture and opens Hungary's first university in Pécs. Finally, from the House of Luxembourg, King Sigismund marries Lajos's daughter, and in 1433 is crowned Holy Roman Dingbat. King Matthias Corvinus the Just, born in 1443, elected King of Hungary and Croatia in 1458 at age 15. After several military campaigns, he became the King of Bohemia and the Duke of Austria. He married Catherine of Porabrandi in 1461, but both she and her son died in childbirth in 1464. In 1476, he married his third wife, Beatrice of Naples, daughter of King Ferdinand I. He only had an illegitimate son, John Corvinus, who did not follow him to the throne. Matthias was educated in Italian and promoted the Renaissance's cultural influences in Buda, Esztergom, Székesfehérvár, and Visegrad, establishing public health and education and a new legal system. In 1465, he founded the Universitas Istropolitana in Bratislava. He rebuilt the royal palace in Buda in the Renaissance style. He was a strong supporter of the arts and sciences. He even had Filippino Lippi and Verrocchio in residence for a time. He spoke Romanian, Croatian, German, Greek, Latin, and Italian. He founded the Matthias Corvinus Library, Europe's greatest collection of secular books at the time. His legacy was that although he was elected by a small anti-Habsburg popular revolution, he kept the barons in check, sounded out the public opinion by mixing with them incognito. Comparing it to much harsher periods following, his reign is considered one of the most glorious in Hungarian history. There is a proverb, Matthias has died, justice is gone. It's 1516 now, with the ill-fated Louis II, 10 years old, coming to the throne of Hungary and Bohemia on the death of his father. As a result, he was adopted by the Holy Roman Dingbat Max I, till he died in 1519, then by his guardian Georg von Hohenzollern, Margrave of Brandenburg und Ansbach. Louis owed his allegiance to the Imperial Habsburgs as a member of the Order of the Golden Fleece. He's wearing the chain of office around his neck, the dead sheep dangling at the bottom center. In 1522, age 16, he married Mary of Habsburg, granddaughter of Max I. On August 29, 1526, age 20, Louis led his troops into battle against the advancing Turkish Ottomans, led by Suleiman the Magnificent, at the Battle of Mohacs. It was a disastrous defeat, Louis dying in a marsh. Darkness descended on Hungary for 150 years. Battles, unsuccessful uprisings, and Calvinism were the order of the day. There are 3 things the Turks left of note: Turkish baths, found all over Hungary, though mainly in Budapest. We'd call them more like spas. This is one of the earliest remaining, the Rudas baths. The second is coffee, with a mouthpiece of fantastically, deliciously rich Doberstorte. And finally, roses. Back to Hungary's checkered past. 1657 saw the Habsburgian Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I come to the throne. He had many wars with the French, finally beating them at Blenheim, but his main war was against the Ottoman Empire. In 1683, the Turks, supported by rebellious Hungarians, laid siege to Wien. A holy alliance between the forces of Austria, led by the famous general Prince Eugene of Savoy, was joined by the Russians and the Poles, led by General Jan Sobieski, who was acclaimed the victor of that battle. In 1686, Prince Eugene reclaimed Budapest, and in 1687 he retook Mohacs, avenging the defeat of Ludwig II in 1526. And finally, in 1697, showed the Turks some kick-ass at the Battle of Zenta. Hungary was mainly whole again and in Habsburgian hands. The Hungarians are second-class citizens, speaking a language no one other than a Hungarian can understand. Oppressed by their nobles and abject subjects of an absolute emperor, Leopold I. They're ready to revolt, so up pops Ferenc Rákóczi, 1676-1735. By 1703, large portions of the country are under his control. In 1705, he is proclaimed ruler of the country, and he establishes a governing structure. After the death of Leopold I, his son Charles III comes to the throne. In 1710, the last battle is fought at Romhany. Though a draw, Rákóczi, with no allies, goes into exile, dying in Turkey in 1735. Once more, Hungarians are a mere footnote, a backwater in Eastern European history, forgotten in time. 1741 saw Marie Theresia come to the throne, and in spite of her father Charles VI's pragmatic sanction, allowing a woman, Marie Theresia, to become empress, signed by all the major European countries, Frederick of Prussia was the first one to break it by invading Silesia. The kings of France, Bavaria, Spain, Naples, and Saxony each wanted their little bits and pieces. So began the wars of the Austrian succession, lasting from 1740 to 1748. So this weak woman, having just given birth to her first son, Joseph, under cannon fire from Bavarian invaders in Wien, turned to the only ally, Hungary. Holding the babe Joseph in her arms, she spoke. "The clouds of danger gather above us from all directions. I do not want to hide this fact from my beloved Hungarians, as you are also affected by it. The Holy Crown is in danger. I'm in danger with my child, abandoned by all others. I solicit the help of Hungarian arms, whose fame shines throughout history. I appeal to the well-known gallantry of the Magyars and to their loyalty. It is in this fidelity that I herewith lay my future and my child's future." The response from the nobles, they drew their swords, shouting in one voice, "Vitam et sanguinem pro regina nostra," our life and blood for our queen. The 80,000 Hungarian army proved crucial in defeating her enemies. In gratitude, Marie Theresia built new road systems, canalization, drying up of marshes, and building of schools. Conversely, she denuded Hungary of its young intelligentsia by offering them glamorous positions in Wien. Those that remained behind had to use Latin as their legislative language, isolating them even more from the rest of Europe. The country was in deep decline, exacerbated by the death of the men in the wars of succession. Large parts of the country were deserted. Marie Theresia, being militantly Catholic and fiercely anti-Semitic, exiled most of Austria's Jews to either eastern Hungary or Transylvania. and other peoples were brought in to fill in the void. Joseph II, 1741 to 90, eldest son of Maria Theresia, was the Holy Roman dingbat and co-ruler from 1765, an absolute enlightened ruler. Unlike his mother, favored religious tolerance, reduced the power of the church, relieved the peasantry of feudal burdens, and removed the restrictions on trade and knowledge. In 1781, he decreed that peasants must be paid in cash. But in Hungary, the nobles resisted, and he had to be content with halfway measures. In 1784, he abolished Latin and made German the lingua franca. Elementary school was mandatory for all boys and girls. In 1785, by imperial patent, he abolished serfdom. In Belgium and Hungary, everyone resented the way he tried to do away with regional government and subordinate everything to his own personal criteria and rule. By 1790, in Hungary, the nobles were all but in open rebellion. At his death, he had trodden roughshod over age-old autocratic privileges, liberties, and prejudices, creating many enemies, and they triumphed in the end. Joseph's attempt to reform the Hungarian lands illustrates the weakness of absolutism in the face of well-defended feudal liberties. He tried too much and too soon. The greatest statesman in Hungarian history, Count István Széchenyi, de Szarevár Fölösvédek, 1791 to 1860, one of Hungary's noble families linked with the Liechtenstein, Esterházy, Lobkowicz, and Festitics. After a stint in the Austrian army as a lieutenant in 1826, he turned to politics. He traveled extensively in Europe. He found the contrast of England in 1815 undergoing the Industrial Revolution and Hungary's feudal system stark. The freeing of the serfs by Joseph II had been repealed. Social reform became his life force until he died, but within the empire. Unlike Lajos Kossuth, who was all for revolution. More about him later. In 1825, he gave his whole annual income for the establishment of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. In 1827, he formed the Nemzeti Casino, a forum for political dialogue of the reform movement. Apart from his political ideas, he concentrated on the development of transportation vital to the economic growth. The Habsburgs put him in charge for years, developing and maintaining the navigability of the Danube to the Black Sea. A local and even more important economic concern was the development of Buda and Pest together. To that end, he was the prime mover in a permanent bridge connecting the two cities. Its correct title is the Széchenyi Lánchíd, the Széchenyi Chain Bridge. His relations with the revolutionary Lajos Kossuth were not good. After Kossuth's failed revolution of 1848, he agreed briefly to become the Minister of Transportation and Social Affairs. Eventually, he became so upset with the failed revolution, he had a mental breakdown. His wife was able to nurse him back to health. He wrote 2 more treatises, Omniseret, about children, education, and pedagogy, and the more important work, Ein Blick, one look, about the deep political problems facing Hungary at the beginning of the 1850s. Sadly for his family in Hungary, he shot himself on April 8, 1860. The whole country went into mourning for the father of modern Hungary. Lajos Kossuth, 1802-1894, lawyer, journalist, politician, orator, rabble-rouser, and president/regent of Hungary, April to August of 1849. He is the hero of the failed 1849 revolution and considered a freedom fighter by the United States and the United Kingdom. He pushed for the abolition of feudal burdens and taxation of nobles. He also broached the subject of separation from Austria. The nail in his coffin was his extreme nationalism combined with his belief of the superiority of the Magyars over the Slavonic inhabitants of Hungary. This ensured the collapse of Hungary in 1849 and his own political demise. 1848 to 1849 was the era of liberal revolution, first in France, then in Poland, and in March of 1848, Kossuth demanded a parliamentary government for Hungary from the Emperor Ferdinand V, and his buddy, Lajos Bethany, acting as Prime Minister of Hungary's first revolutionary government, appointed Kossuth as Minister of Finance. He printed its own currency with Kossuth's picture on it. Kossuth notes, in July, Kossuth, in a rabble-rousing speech, demanded the raising of 200,000 men, an army of self-defense. The Habsburgs, on the other hand, stirred up the non-ethnic Hungarians and got additional help from the Russians, so that by August of 1849, with the new Emperor Franz Joseph in power and all previous Austrian concessions to the Hungarians revoked, Franz Joseph retook Buda Castle. Kossuth, who had declared himself regent of Hungary, abdicated. Smart move. Kossuth was finished. He fled to the Ottoman Empire, where his wife and children joined him. He spent the rest of his life speechifying in England and in the US, where he was treated like royalty. Yet in all events, he got no support to re-revolutionize Hungary. His last years were spent in Turin, and in 1867, at the time of the Ausgleich, the Austro-Hungarian Compromise, he prophetically wrote his vision for Hungary's future, that having bound itself to the Austrian-German nation and the Habsburgs, it would go down with them. He saw the coming of World War I, where Hungary would be on the side of the dying empire. Quote, I see the compromise as the death of our nation. On March 20th, 1894, he died in Turin and was buried in Budapest. Many see him as Hungary's purest patriot and greatest orator. This may be true, but without him, Hungary's future still would have been the same. The 1921 disastrous Trianon Treaty would still have been enforced. Brief mention must be made of Count Lajos Bottyány, born in Bratislava 1807, executed in Pest 1849. He was a hereditary peer in the upper house of the Diet. In 1839-40, as leader of the opposition, he drew up a reform plan. Though initially he agreed with István Szécheny's moderate views on economics and politics, by 1842 he sided firmly with the revolutionary Kossuth. By 1847, Bottyány was the leader of the opposition in the upper house, while Kossuth in the lower. With the ascent of Emperor Ferdinand V in 1848, he became head of state. One of his first jobs was to organize the armed forces and local governments. Though a capable leader, he was caught between the Habsburgs on the one hand and the Hungarian separatists on the other. It all came to a head on September the 13th, 1848, when Bottyány announced a rebellion. In January of 1849, with Franz Joseph now as emperor, he is captured by the Austrians in Pest, and on October the 6th of 1849 is executed by firing squad on the same day as the 13 Hungarian generals in Arad, the martyrs of Arad. So the 1849 rebellion was not entirely a bloodless one. Ferenc Deák, 1803-1878, born into an ancient noble family, studied and became a lawyer and a notary, entering politics by being elected to the Diet in 1833. After his brother died in 1842, to show his support for internal reform, he liberated his serfs and voluntarily paid taxes. During the 1848 revolution, he briefly accepted the position of Minister of Justice in the Lajos Bottyány government. After attempting several compromises with the Habsburgs and failing, he resigned his cabinet position in October of 1848 and retired. He came out of retirement in 1861, again to be a member of the Diet, and to be the prime mover in the creation of the Ausgleich, the compromise of 1867 between Austria and Hungary. He died in 1876 and was buried with much pomp. Parliament created a law commemorating his service and ordered a statue erected with national funds. It stands today in Ferenc Deák Square at the junction of the 3 underground lines. The wise man of the nation. With the death of Emperor Franz Joseph in November of 1916, the Austro-Hungarian Empire began its precipitous fall. His nephew, Charles I of Austria, and as Charles IV, King of Hungary, became the new emperor. But that only lasted till just after the armistice in 1918, when he renounced participation in state affairs, but did not abdicate. So what were the victorious allies to do with Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire? The two strongest nations were Britain and France, neither of which wanted to see the resurgence of Germany and German-speaking peoples. Solution? Break it up. Not sensibly, just break it up. On June 4th, 1920, at the Palace of Trianon, a peace treaty was signed. Hungary lost 72% of its territory, 64% of its population, 31% of its ethnic population now living in foreign countries. On top of that, 5 of the 10 most populous cities were lost, and a direct access to the Mediterranean. So Lajos Kossuth's prediction came true. Once again, Hungary has been brought to its knees through rebellion and bad alliances, sadly, soon to be repeated again. 1919, in Hungary, the Jewish communist Béla Kun took over the government and declared Hungary a Soviet republic and commenced Hungary's Red Terror, killing about 500 of perceived elitists. A counter-revolutionary government was formed headed by Admiral Miklos Horthy. In late 1919, Romanian forces invaded Hungary and Béla Kun and his government fled. The Romanians left and Admiral Horthy's National Army entered. The Communist Party was banned, and in 1920, Horthy was declared regent and head of state. Horthy permitted the White Terror in revenge for the Red, killing liberals and some young activist communist Jews. It was finally stopped in 1921. Miklos Horthy was a right-wing conservative quasi-dictator from 1919 to 1944, who allied himself with the Nazis in exchange for some of the territories lost by the Trianon Treaty, a move soon to be regretted. March 19, 1944, the Germans invaded and occupied Hungary. Adolf Eichmann started shipping Jews to the death camps in May. Finally, Horthy was able to stop it in July. In October of 1944, Horthy had finalized a surrender to the Soviets, but Hitler anticipated this and seized his son Miklos Jr. Horthy himself was captured and imprisoned in a castle in Bavaria after having, under duress, signed over Hungary. His replacement was the Hungarian Ferenc Szalasi, leader of the anti-Semitic fascist Arrow Cross Party. They shot 10 to 15,000 Hungarian Jews on the banks of the Danube, and Eichmann shipped trainloads to Auschwitz. In all of the 825,000 Jews in Hungary, only 260,000 survived, a loss of almost 70%. Horthy, his wife and son, eventually moved to Estoril in Portugal, where he died in February of 1957. Hungary, a kingdom without a king, ruled by an admiral without a fleet, in a country without a coastline. Once again, Hungary was to pay the price for being on the wrong side of a major war. In February of 1945, the Big Three held their high-level conference in Yalta in the Crimea. The partition of Germany and its allies were decided. Churchill's map shows 3 major divisions: North Germany, South Germany, including Hungary, and West Germany, all parts to be in the West sphere of influence. Meanwhile, FDR split Germany into Hanover, Prussia, Hesse, Saxony, Bavaria, 2 international enclaves, and Austria. The final plan agreed to: the British zone in the north, French in the middle, the American in the south, and in the east, the Soviet and East Germany. Hungary was swallowed up into the Soviet communist bloc. Enter the scene another Hungarian revolutionary, Imre Nagy, 1896 to 1958, born to a peasant family in Kaposvár, situated northwest of Pécs and south of Lake Balaton. In 1930, he traveled to Moscow and joined the Communist Party. Here, he was an informant for the NKVD. After the war, he became Minister of Agriculture, then Minister of the Interior, and Speaker of the National Assembly 47 to 49, and eventually Chairman of the Councils of Ministers in 1953. His promotion of a new course of socialism got him sacked from all his positions by the Soviets in 1955. October 23rd, the beginning of the 1956 revolution. By popular demand, he was reinstated as chairman of the Council of Ministers. After some sporadic street fighting in Budapest, Nagy, on November the 1st, announced Hungary's withdrawal from the Warsaw Pact, appealing in vain for support from the UN, the US, and the UK. November 4th saw the Russian military might put down another Hungarian failed revolution. Nagy took refuge in the Yugoslav embassy. In spite of a written safe conduct passage by Prime Minister János Kadar, he was arrested and 2 years later in a secret trial convicted of treason and shot. In May of 1989, the Austrian-Hungarian fence came down, well ahead of the Berlin Wall. On June 16th, 100,000 Hungarians paid tribute to their hero, Imre Nagy, attending his reburial in the same plot. Viktor Orbán, born May 31st, 1963 in Székesfehérvár, studied law in Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest and spent 6 months at Oxford University. He was prime minister from 1998 to 2002, and now, since 2008, with a supermajority, he rewrote the Hungarian constitution. As a founding member of the Fidesz party now in power, he has screwed the Hungarians in many ways. 1. He is all-powerful, a cross between Miklos Horthy and Fidel Castro. 2. Redrawn the constitution, making it virtually impossible for any other party to come to power. 3. Given voting rights to all Hungarians living outside Hungary, trying to recover from the Trianon Treaty. 4. Limited the freedom of the press. 5. Destroyed and stolen most of the people's private pensions. 6. Destroyed the civil rights of employees, the unemployed, and the disabled. Viktor Orbán is a little megalomaniac man, head of the Fidesz party, a Bolshevik socialist party where only one voice is heard, his. He keeps power by internally telling the people of Hungary's superiority over all other European nations, that the EU and the World Bank conspire against it, while at the same time he keeps the door open to the far-right Nazi-styled extremists, the Jobbik Party. He does all this while appealing to the past Prime Minister dictator János Kadar, who catered to the entitlement society. Hungary is a country whose greatest periods were under the expansionist kings Karl I and Lajos I the Great, 1308 to 1387, the Renaissance cultural king Matthias Corvinus the Just, 1458 to 1490. Finally, under Franz Joseph and Sisi, 1848 to 1916, that brought Hungary into the modern world. Hungary was at its greatest as a kingdom. It should have taken the opportunity to invite Amadeo Duca de Aosta to be the new king. After the last Habsburg, the blessed Karl IV, stepped down. Hungary, after World War I, descended into communism, Béla Kun, regent dictator Miklos Horthy, tyrant Ferenc Szalasi, and post-World War II, socialism. Then instant democracy. Hungarians know nothing and have no understanding of democracy, so now they have a cheap little banana republic dictator despot. Hungary's future? Rebellion.